What are you doing? Don't you know that's bad for the environment?
What?
Let me show you. Alright, so here we have a basic example of a supply and demand graph. We have the supply curve, we have the demand curve. Here we have the consumer surplus, which is the area below the demand curve, but above the equilibrium price. Then you have the producer surplus, which is the area below the price, equilibrium price, and above the supply curve. This is the equilibrium quantity, the equilibrium price. Now we're using Germany here as an example because Germany is a developed country with one of the highest rates for minimizing food waste as compared with the US, which is historically poor. In a minute, we're going to show how we're going to shift the US supply and demand graph to look like Germany's right here. Alrighty, so here we have a graph of the USA, and as we saw before with Germany, in this graph, Germany is represented by the quantity 2 and by the price PC, which is the price that consumers have to pay. And this is the price and the quantity that we want the US to shift to. Currently the US is at the quantity 1 and the equilibrium price. So in order to do this, we're going to implement a tax. So right here we have the regular supply and demand curve. The supply at the equilibrium is then shifted up and to the left by the tax, by the amount of the tax. For the demand curve, we're just going to move along the demand curve. There's not going to be a shift of the whole demand curve. So the demand curve for both is the same. Now when we do this, the deadweight loss is this area right here. So that's basically price, that's the money that's foregone, it's lost. And then right here, we have the consumer burden and the producer burden. And these two areas combined is the government revenue. And the government could use this money to help with waste or any such means that they see fit. And then top, consumer surplus, producer surplus. Now when we implement the tax, consumer surplus is lost. We lose some consumer surplus. Consumer surplus before the tax is this area. Consumer surplus with the consumer burden. And then producer surplus before the tax is producer surplus and the producer burden. So we lose the consumer burden when we implement the tax. So the consumer surplus just becomes this area at the top when we implement the tax. And then producer surplus increases to include not only producer burden, but also the area for consumer burden, which is this whole area right here. And when we do this, when we increase the price, decrease the quantity, we reach the minimization allocation for food waste. And that's exactly what we're shooting for. Hey, what are you doing?
Cleaning out the pantry.
Don't you remember what we talked about before?
Yeah, I guess everyone does have to do their part.
Yeah, everyone's got to help to contribute to the environment.